Okay, I haven't posted on here in a very long time, but I just finished my first ever narrative short film. It's something that I had never done before, of like scripting something out and casting actors and getting a crew and finding locations and shooting a real film. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. It didn't turn out amazing, but I did it. It took a really long time and it was really hard to do. So I want to just quickly talk about two of the main things I learned while making this short film. Okay, number one is how difficult logistics are. And then number two is camera coverage. I shot this film for like $2,000, which kind of sounds like a lot, but then when you consider that it's a crew of like 8 to 10 people and I'm feeding them and paying for gas to get everywhere and renting equipment, that $2,000 goes like that. It does not go far. So I was under some serious restrictions because I couldn't pay any of the actors, I couldn't pay any of the crew. The only thing I paid for actually in terms of crew is sound recording and sound mixing. But I pulled a bunch of people together and we made it happen. I think the summary for this is that you never film anything in a vacuum. It's one thing to write a script, and I could write a script about bungee jumping off the highest point on Earth and falling into outer space and landing in a stadium full of people. All of those things are just incredibly difficult to make happen visually. When you're writing something or filming something, you have to be considering every other element of that thing, and it's this big puzzle piece that you're putting together rather than just like, oh, well, it would have been cool to have 9 more locations. Well, yeah, it would have been, but A, I don't have the money to do that. We only have 3 days to shoot, and I have to work through the logistics of getting all these people to have their day off of their normal job at the same time so that we can all be in the same place and have 3 days in a row. It's a very difficult logistical issue. I think approaching the film holistically from the beginning, it's hard to overplan. It is 12:45-ish a.m. We were driving to Beaver. As we're driving, the car that the two main characters drive in the film, just the power kind of stopped working. We're thinking through the scenes that we have to film tomorrow, and I think there's a way to make this work without the car if that's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, we wait for 5 minutes and it starts back up. We drive to Beaver and the rest of everything goes perfectly. Okay, now number two, which is probably much more interesting to talk about, is camera coverage. Just means what angles I'm getting of a conversation. Or another reason to do this and get insert shots is because if there's a continuity error of someone looking or turning and you need time to mask that between cuts, you can have an insert shot or like a wider shot where you can't really see what's happening as much. And these are all things that I wish I had when I was editing that I didn't shoot. So camera coverage is something that I knew I was going to have to deal with, and I considered it when I was shot listing things, and I thought through what angles I wanted. I didn't fully realize what this meant until I was editing, and I wish that I had known sooner. Something that surprised me is that you want tons of coverage. Let's look at this scene from my short film, which is the worst scene in the whole thing to me.
If you're worried about distance, we're actually closer to home, so we can just flip around. But yeah, I did not realize how long this was gonna take.
I'm sorry.
It's totally fine. The longer the better, honestly.
Okay, so in that, I only have 2 shots. It's just over the shoulder. And there's plenty of other reasons that this happened, because I had rented equipment that we could shoot through the window that didn't end up getting reserved properly or something, or we were missing a piece. We just didn't have an alternative, so we had to just make up something on the spot, and so we just shot from the back. The French over the shoulder is what it's called. Anyway, there's a bunch of reasons that it ended up this way logistically, but visually in the final product, it's not interesting. There's no dynamic thing happening in the conversation, right? It doesn't like progress anywhere. So when I was editing and I wanted a different reaction, or I wish that we had a different angle, I just had to switch back and forth between these 2 shots. There's like nothing to put in between. So recently I was watching Sorry to Bother You, which is such a good movie. I had seen it before and I highly recommend that you watch it. But the very opening scene I loved because it's all static shots. So they're just locked off, the camera's on a tripod, and there's like very little movement happening. In my short film, I budgeted a very short amount of time because I was like, we'll get in there, we'll run through it 3 or 4 times, I'll get just over the shoulders and a wide and call it good. But look at all of the different camera angles for this one scene. There are over 17 different angles of this same office. And the reason that this is important is because if you're watching a conversation go back and forth, it visually feels like it's going nowhere. But the point of a conversation in any film is to get from point A to point B. The idea has to develop to something, or new information has to be released to someone, or some progress is being made. So if you can have a new angle to switch to when a new idea is being introduced, it helps the viewer to realize that we're getting new information and that things are like moving along. So here's the first like 5 seconds of Sorry to Bother You, and look at how many shots they go through in just 5 seconds. This is insane.
So it says here that you were manager of the Rusty Scupper restaurant for 5 years.
So obviously shooting a scene like that takes a longer amount of time. And I didn't have that kind of time, and we were just like pounding through it. But I still wish that I had somehow accounted for that, or simplified down what I was shooting to just like 3 scenes somehow, and gotten all the coverage that my heart desired. One other thing is that not only do I wish I had more angles just pointing at different things, but I wish I had more dynamic shots of the characters moving back and forth. So in the final scene of my film, which is like the climax where the two are getting in this big argument, they're both just standing there staring at each other in this argument. It makes the coverage boring because I'm just switching back and forth over the shoulder and there's nothing going on. I have 4 shots for that whole scene versus the 17 in Sorry to Bother You. I wish that I had had them walking and turning back, and I wish I had the camera moving with them and making a much more dynamic, interesting scene, which would have been way more entertaining to watch, and I think would have made the drama feel a lot more close to home. One last thing, this is like a bonus thing that I learned, is that nobody is gonna do anything for you. You have to completely do it yourself. Like everything. And I had so much help. There were people that went way out of their way to help me. There was like an assistant director that helped so much, and the AC, and like seriously, so many favors were done. But at the end of the day, when it's put on a hard drive, no one's gonna just magically do something for you. And if it's not working, just waiting isn't gonna make it work. And that's what I tried for like 6 months and nothing happened. I finally set a deadline for myself and I said, by the end of 2020, like I need to wrap this up this year. When I set that deadline and I started making moves to make that happen, it's 2020 right now and my film is done. I think setting deadlines and like making things happen yourself and knowing that no one else is gonna just walk in the room and do it for you, that is massive. And that is something that I'm learning again and again and again and again. And it seems like these things are obvious, but I think you learn them on a new level once you are actually doing that thing. If you're interested in filming your own thing, or if you just like watching movies, I hope that this is like insightful or interesting, because now when I watch movies, I think about how did they make this happen? How did they produce this? How many people had to be there? What had to go into all the planning, and how many props did they have to get? Or I watch a conversation and I'm like, wow, they got so many angles of this. Or look how they moved from point A to point B, and how did the lighting change to follow what they're saying or the mood of the conversation. So my first experience taught me so much, and I have so much more to learn, but I thought I'd just kind of make this as a journal to myself and to show all you guys what I've been learning. But I hope you guys have a happy new year, and I'll see you next year. Bye.